Good evening, folks. I hope you are able to see us today live on Lighthouse Liberation. I am your host, Rod, and this is my co host, Chris, who's just come back from Antarctica, where the penguins roam, but no buffalo roam. Um, Tonight's episode, we're going to be dealing with ayahuasca. Ayahuasca, if you are not privy to it, uh, hold on just a sec. I am listening to myself in stereo because I left my YouTube page open. Here we go. All right, just wanted to make sure we were working. Ayahuasca, for those of you that don't know, is a plant medicine that comes from the Quechua natives in South America, Central and South America. It has become very popular down there within the natives, as well as establishing a couple of religions along the way. The reason it's become so popular, at least for people in the U.S., is there is some kind of a retreat that people that are dealing with anxiety, depression, and PTSD have found can be beneficial to alleviate some of these symptoms. So tonight we will be discussing all about ayahuasca. Um, Anything you have to add, Senor Chris?
No, I think that as we go through, so I have had a few experiences with ayahuasca, all within the course of a retreat. I have an appreciation for the medicine. It's often referred to as the grandmother, for sometimes mother, but often grandmother, for very particular reasons. It's a powerful medicine on the scale of psychedelics. Like if we, look at cannabis as a minor psychedelic, especially it could be more major, especially if you do it in edible form, but it's there. Then you have things like psilocybin and LSD. Typically, you would consider ayahuasca at another tier, and then straight DMT, 5-MeO DMT at another tier of its own. So um, I know a lot of people have had their entry point on ayahuasca because
Mhm,
of the popularity of retreats.
mhm.
Um, my personal view is that this ain't your beginner medicine, that there are better places to start. But we'll talk about that as we go through, like where not only like what are the benefits of ayahuasca and what is unique to ayahuasca and how could it best be used, but also like where might this fit in if you're thinking about your toolkit or things that you might want to utilize, and where along your journey might this come in, then I'll add some commentary to help with that as well.
Awesome, awesome. And I do have to say, back when I was pretty deep in my self-loathing and PTSD. If you've seen episode one, you've seen me comment on this. One of the reasons that I started looking for help was a documentary I saw in where somebody with PTSD traveled down to South America or Costa Rica, I forget where, took some ayahuasca, and spent an entire night just puking and shitting himself all over the place, and then the following day, you could just see it in his face. You could just see what it had done for him. And that kind of got me going into well, crap, there's stuff out there that might be able to help out. And so that is what started me on my journey, mainly with counseling and then later with other medicines. I haven't really truly done ayahuasca in the
Mhm.
way that is the therapeutic form. I've tried a microdose, if you could say that, but I did find it, um, yeah, I did find it to be more potent than the psilocybin itself.
Yeah,
But
and
in a different
my
way. In a different way.
and I think we're thinking about the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what you had experienced at another point in time was actually part of ayahuasca, but not the full. So it was actually a very different medicine than ayahuasca itself. And so I think we can get into the differences of how this can and is utilized. But when you're talking about ayahuasca proper, um, it's definitely an experience unto itself. And I know you've got slides in here that kind of go into like what is ayahuasca and
Yeah.
like what are these different plants? And I think I'll jump into that when we get to that part of it,
All right.
which is
So with
apparently
that,
now.
what is ayahuasca? And I'm sorry, after having been a teacher for so long, I find that slides not only give me a visual, but they also help keep me on track. And it's also a way to help keep me honest because, you know, honestly, sometimes you hear something and it rolls around in your head for a little bit, and you try to share it with a friend, and then it's a little bit twisted or a little bit different or took on another interpretation. So when I'm doing the research and that kind of thing, I like to write the notes down. I like to have them in front of me so that I don't misspeak to the medicine and
Mhm.
I don't misinform anybody out there. And I know this is the time of misinformation going out there and people going crazy about it. So this is a way
Definitely.
of me keeping us honest. I will never try to misinform anybody, at least not intentionally. If I do it accidentally, I apologize for that. Please correct me. You are free to go down there on the chat box, send me a message saying, Rod, you're full of it. Well, I heard differently, or my brother's cousin's neighbor's son told me this other story. Whatever it is you feel like sharing, please feel free to do so on that messenger box thing that we have there. So, if I may read so that I don't mess things up, ayahuasca is a South American psychoactive brew, and it is a brew, it's a type of a tea, used both socially and ceremonial. It's a spiritual medicine amongst the peoples of the Amazon basin. It is a psychedelic and what they call I'm going to mispronounce this, and theogenic. Hope I said it right. Which means it just induces alterations in perception. So they mix the brew made out of this vine, and there's the name if you want to really try to pronounce that, and a shrub, right? Those are the main two ingredients. Now they also add other things to it, probably for flavor and smell and taste, and call it their own. And this one's got a little red hot chili, and this one's got this or that. Doesn't matter. What you're looking for is those two combinations to get you to the DMT, which is the primary psychoactive. Um, they might introduce other leaves or plants in there that also have DMT, depending on which tribe, which shaman, which religion that you are getting it from. There's other chemicals that are in there, such as let me go DMT and the MAOI, which is the monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And there's an example of a couple of them. So ayahuasca is prepared in the tea, and when consumed, it produces the altered state of consciousness or your high, including visual hallucinations and altered perceptions of reality. Now,
So,
why would we want that?
well, but to jump into this a little bit, so the experience I had was at a place called Rhythmia, which is in Costa Rica. And Rhythmia is not the traditional place to do this particular medicine. Often, the traditional place to do this medicine is people go full on into the jungle and then are surrounded by jungle, are sleeping in the jungle, sometimes on the dirt floors, sometimes in cots. It is the experience around it can be very powerful as well because it really connects you with nature. Rhythmia is the glammed up the glamping version of that, if you will. You get to go back to a nice room. What I will say is that in my experience, having been there and known many friends that have gone there as well, the capabilities of the shaman, the capabilities of the care there, the medical workers to be able to support this, uh, the food and diet to support it as well, because food and diet is important when you're using a medicine like this. Um, and the little ceremonial temple that they do this within are all truly beautiful, and I believe in the same energy of a lot of where this came from. So, but the reason I'm sharing that is because each night we did this 4 successive nights. Each
Mhm.
night they had a different brew that was done from a different region within the Amazon basin, and there were differences in it. There's differences in the amount of DMT that's there. There's differences in the other alkaloids, and so like some of the brews, especially the more traditional Colombian brew, was very purgative, meaning you're going to release from either end or both ends way more. Other brews are less purgative. There
Sounds
is a
like an awesome
difference.
party drug.
It is definitely something you want to take as a party. It's kind of like there are multiple. We talked the last episode about psychedelic mushrooms and psilocybin, but there are other psychedelic mushrooms as well, right? And they all have slightly different effects than
Mhm,
the standard ones. And it's kind of like that. The brews can be they're on a spectrum, much like psychedelic mushrooms can be. Um, but you have these two plants. One of them is an MAO inhibitor. What that means is basically just deactivating some stuff that's naturally within our gut that prevents DMT from entering our system. Right, so that's the B-cappy vine, and all that is doing is to allow the digestive system to allow DMT through so that it can enter your system. The
mhm,
other leaf there, the viridis leaf, is the one that contains DMT. Now, a lot of plants contain DMT. This just happens to be one that has it in higher amounts that works well with this particular brew. Um, when Rod was sharing earlier that he has had some experience with ayahuasca, he has, and it was with the vine portion, the MAO inhibitor, but not yet with the DMT portion. But when you combine these two, it's not like a 1 + 1 = 2. It's a 1 + 1 = taking you to infinity, right? Yeah, it's a substantial, it's a real powerful medicine that has its own um, nature to it, if you will. I mean, if you want to talk spiritual, it's talked about as the grandmother. It has its own intelligence, its own spirit. If we want to keep it to just like the psychological realm and the physiological realm, it has very profound impacts upon the body physiologically in terms of purging and releasing things. And then emotionally, energetically, as a powerful psychedelic, way more powerful than mushrooms are, to be able to like work through some of the challenges that you might be having.
Now it's interesting because everything that I read about ayahuasca was like it's natural. It's supposed to be getting connected with the earth.
Mm,
A lot of the thing, a lot of the articles I read, they were talking about setting being very
yeah.
important. There's a reason that they take you out to the jungle. There's a reason that they have a shrine. There's a reason for all that kind of stuff. And then oddly enough, I ran some into something called pharmawaska,
Mm,
in where people are now trying to take the chemical components of the DMT and the MAOI and creating I guess, a standardized ayahuasca experience in a pill.
yeah.
I didn't find too much information on that after, other than that. But it was just kind of like, huh, okay, interesting.
I
Both good
think
and bad.
we're gonna see more and more of this type of thing, right? And this is also happening with psilocybin. It's happening with other medicines as well. And what
Right.
the you have happening is as companies are beginning to take this and trying to create therapies off of this, one of the challenges with natural, versions of this, number one is it sustainable? So you talk about ayahuasca, the vine and stuff that is utilized for this grows slowly. And so there is a concern that as the uptake in this comes forth, that it may not be sustainable. We may actually begin overutilizing, and we may be at that point already of overutilizing the supplies that are there. So sustainability with this is an important thing. And then the second thing is once you take this into a therapeutic setting, you want things to be as standardized as possible.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen with purely organic substances. It's like when we talked in our last episode. You could have, one mushroom that has X amount of psilocybin. You can have another mushroom that has B amount of psilocybin, right? And they may not be in relation to each other. And
Right.
so you're finding the standardization happen over and over and over again. I do believe there is something missing there because the power of the ritual around it, the power of the ceremony, the power of nature around these things, I believe is often underestimated in the healing and connective nature of that. However, that doesn't mean it still can't be very, very powerful as a therapy in specific settings. In the same way that MDMA, um, fully man-made, utilized in very sterile settings, often like a therapist's office, etc., can have profound effects when it comes to something like PTSD. So it depends on what you're utilizing it for, And is this a thing that is for a specific experience that you're going for? Like, I'm really looking to deal with anxiety, really looking to deal with like depression, whatever else it might be. Or is this, I'm looking to have an experience that helps me understand who and what I am and where I fit into this universe. And it's an exploration around those realms, around returning to the nature of what man is, man and womankind is. And those are two very different experiences.
Definitely, definitely. So, nomenclature, just for those of you that are interested, the ayahuasca is the Hispanicized or Spanish spelling of the word ayahuasca. It's a word that came from Quechan. In Quechan, they in their language, it's two words: aya meaning spirit, soul, corp, or dead body, and huasca meaning rope or woody vine. So there's a couple of interpretations that some people have taken with this. It's like, is this the vine to the soul? Is this the
Yes.
spirit
So,
of the body? Is this, you can
so
take many
that
interpretations of that, but that's what
one of the things
ayahuasca.
I've heard around this, in terms of why it's soul, spirit, but especially like dead body, is this is one of those medicines that feels, this is hard. How do you describe this? This is like, again, trying to use poetry and words to describe something that's indescribable. Um, but it feels earthy. It feels grounding. It almost, while you can go visit, let's say, the cosmos, on this medicine, or you can go into your internal cosmos. You can deal with your own emotional stuff. For me, it always has felt like there's something like the earth around you, like you're being held by Mother Earth, Mother Gaia, if you will. There's a, um, what word do I want to use? Uh,
Very much a female deity component to it.
Female deity, but also, you know how like air is light and earth is heavy? Not heavy like bad, but there's a solidity to it that I
Hmm.
have felt, that experience of it, right? Rather than being like light and air and psh, it's like
Grounded.
I could grounding. Man,
No?
again, putting words to it after I've been traveling for 30 hours from Antarctica to get back here is a very interesting thing tonight. Um, Oh, I'll I'll sit with that thought and I'll see if I can actually put it into words as we continue to go through this, through tonight's show.
Well, we'll see what we can find. A little history on ayahuasca. It is one of the oldest medicines out there. Evidence suggests that it can date back over 1,000 years. Apparently, in Bolivia, they found a cave with some of the shaman artifacts, and within those artifacts, they found some ayahuasca residues. So apparently, it keeps doesn't need refrigeration, right? Um, in the US, in the 50s, scientists began to study ayahuasca as a possible cure for opiate addiction. So I guess smoking opium was a big deal back then, not unlike what has been happening with Big Pharma up to a couple of years ago when they decided that, hey, let's give everybody opium, especially at the VA, right? In the form of different hydrocodines, whatever it is they had out there. So apparently ayahuasca is been looked at into getting you off of the opiates as well. It is also apparently good for alcoholism. So to pretty much reduce the addictive tendencies in people, I guess is what it's actually doing.
Well, I think there's a specific thing that's happening there. And again, this is where I am definitely not a doctor, but it's my understanding of it. When you start to get into alcoholism and opioid
Mhm.
addiction, the two medicines that I know have had substantial effects. One is ayahuasca, and then another is iboga. And iboga is even a more powerful psychedelic than ayahuasca is. Um, I know that iboga and I believe that ayahuasca, they work on the opioid receptors within the brain and the nervous system.
Mhm.
And there's some resetting that happens there that allows for a shift, a very particular physiological shift when it
Yeah.
comes to those addictions. And that's why it's so powerful, because you go to a point where those cravings that are there because of what's going on with the opioid receptors, is now either significantly lessened or not there. Um,
Right.
So I think that that's the mechanism by why how it works and why it works. Though for people who've had very substantial challenges with alcoholism and opioid abuse, sometimes they will go to something like iboga, even beyond ayahuasca, if ayahuasca doesn't get them there.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Different. Yeah. Different body, different bodies, right? So in Brazil, there's been a couple of modern religious movements based on the use of ayahuasca. The most famous being the Santo Daime and the can I mispronounce it? It's Portuguese. União do Vegetal, or UDV to make it easier, right? Um, let's see now. Usually, in an animistic context, that may be shamanistic, or more often with the UDV and the Santo Daime integrated with Christianity. So they mix a couple of religions in there, and bam, we're going to do ayahuasca instead of taking the hostia like you normally would, the cracker. And you sip of the blood, or you sip of the grandmother. I don't know. Both Santo Daime and União do Vegetal now have members and churches throughout the world. Similarly, in the US and Europe, we've starting to see new religious groups developed in relation to increased ayahuasca use. Some Westerners have teamed up with shamans in the Amazon forest religions, forming ayahuasca healing retreats that aim to be able to cure mental and physical illness and allow for communication with the spirit world. So let me go back to that slide. Um, Apparently, some of these churches have become very popular and have been actually taken to court for giving their members ayahuasca, which they have won. And I have a slide further down. So if you belong to some of these religious communities, then they have now been empowered to import ayahuasca tea and to partake in ayahuasca ceremonies within their religious freedom. Same thing has happened in Amsterdam, because everybody thinks of Amsterdam as the place where you can do any drug in the world, right? But not really. Apparently, not too long ago, I think it was 2010. I might have the slide on here. That they were up in arms about ayahuasca. They took these churches to court. They were trying to figure out what the legalities would be, and finally, the courts in Amsterdam ruled that they could indeed bring it in and offer it to their members. We've seen similar things happen in Europe. It's not illegal in every country. There's lists out there if you're thinking about doing it. There are lists out there about which countries it's legal to, so you can go to a retreat, do it in a safe space, much like Chris did, have ceremony backing it up, and make a ayahuasca vacation out of it. Is that even possible? I don't know if that sounds like
Well, I mean, I definitely wouldn't call it a vacation, but like a healing space and everything. Yes.
right.
Um, I think that the one thing that I will share here. So I did it Rhythmia. What I appreciated about Rhythmia was they said this over and over and over again. Initially as a joke, but there's some reality to this. It's like we're a club, not a cult. We're a club, not a cult, right? And I think one of the reasons that that's important, and it has nothing to do with these churches or these religions. Like they're being used as sacraments
Right.
for these churches, right? It is being used that way, and there's a history of it being used. That's why it was able to be defended legally for that. But ayahuasca, much like other psychedelics, but especially ayahuasca, is a very powerful experience. It's very can be a very spiritual experience. So, like one of the bits of advice that I would give to anybody doing this is check into who is leading this experience for you. What is their history? What is their background? What experience do they have? Um, how responsible are they with somebody who is under the influence of these medicines, male or female, right? Um, I say that because it's one of those super powerful psychedelics, which is why you're seeing it used in these churches and religious settings. And I believe it has incredible value in those settings when led by people of integrity and care and who truly respect the medicine, respect the spirit around it, and respect the people coming in. So do make sure that you have an understanding and a real trust for who might be guiding you through this.
Right. And a quick Google search will find what they call, what was it, underground ayahuasca clubs in the US. And prices range from, $200 to $500 per night session or whatever it is. Um, if it's an underground club, it's probably not something legal, even though they're advertising. Um, it's I hope they're doing it ceremoniously is my only hope. But I know that sometimes people are just going to, be people and do it for the experience, which is, I guess, okay. I mean, everybody has that right. But if you are trying to accomplish something, if you are trying to figure something out, um, the site and the setting are very important. So I would almost dissuade from going to Joe Schmo in the trailer park and picking up some ayahuasca from him and maybe going to have a rave in the. I can't see this medicine ever being used as a party drug, but
No,
I could
no.
definitely see this being misused and possibly abused.
Yeah, so
So
for what the in case you don't know much about ayahuasca, what Brad's getting at here is a the experience can be euphoric, and I'll share my experience a little bit later. I had definitely way more on the euphoria side of it, but can also be very purgative. And what I mean by purgative is just what I said earlier. I'm gonna put it very visually now. You can puke and shit an incredible amount on these medicines. And it can also, while be a very healing, it can also be a very challenging, uncomfortable experience as well. And so it's not one that I see being used for parties or anything else. It's not one that I personally feel called to do often. Um, and yet if the right container being the right guide, the right set, the right setting, all of those things being held together can be truly a beautiful transformative experience. So you just want to know, with all these things, anytime that you're going to put yourself into that space where you're going to be that open and, quite honestly, that vulnerable to influence as well, like, you want to know who you're around and you want to be able to trust in that, and you want to have a history of knowing that this person who's guiding this has done this well many, many, many times. And if something goes awry, that they have a plan to know how to deal with it. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but there could be interactions, especially with SSRIs, that you really, really, really want to be careful about, because this is a very powerful medicine. Then that goes into JG's question. Um,
for those
if
of
you
you
haven't,
that are listening to the audio, the question is for people who've never tried any of the medications that you've discussed before, would you recommend people work their way up to ayahuasca rather than just jumping straight into it due to its potency?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this first by saying, number one, I believe in personal responsibility, right? Whatever choice is right for you, as long as you take full responsibility for it, it's right for you. So I'm not here to tell you what you should do, but I am going to tell you what I would recommend. My recommendation is you work your way up to ayahuasca, to be just blatantly honest. It is a powerful psychedelic, and it is a very powerful experience. Now, that's being said, when I went to Rhythmia, there were many people there who this was their first medicine experience of any kind, their first psychedelic experience of any kind. And in that container, it was very disorienting for many of them. And because they were held well, it became very powerful and very healing for many of them as well. But I am very grateful, very, very, very grateful that I started off with other medicines and had a relationship with it, knew what my experience was going to be like, at least to some degree, knew how I was going to behave and think and feel when the world around me began to shift. And that I had spent a fair amount of time before going on an ayahuasca retreat eating well, cleansing the body, as well as doing a lot of meditation and cleansing out of my emotions. I think it's one of the fundamental reasons that my experience with this medicine was very different from many people's experience who were there with me in the same setting and the same nights.
Hmm.
Again, I'll get into what that experience was here in just a little bit, but there are things you can do to set yourself up for success.
So if you truly want to have the ultimate ayahuasca experience, don't do any of that, right? Just like eat a bunch of cheeseburgers, don't meditate, don't prep any, go big or go home, and then the ayahuasca will make sure that you really understand what it does.
So yeah, the way I would describe that, and I heard many people going through this experience while I was there. Um, it's like imagine you are this little straw that's constricted, and you have a lifetime of emotional stuff to deal with. Ayahuasca is powerful. It's gonna push that stuff through, and that may be a very uncomfortable experience for you to have. Versus, I got to go there and I wasn't constricted. I wasn't afraid. I'd, relaxed and opened myself up. I was a fairly big straw, and so it just flowed through. It wasn't an uncomfortable experience.
It almost feels like astronaut training, right? You want to train for the G force so that you know what to expect, and
I never thought about that, but that's a great way for it, right? So that way, when you get into the G-force,
you're
it
not
isn't
puking
freaking you out.
on yourself. You can aim it.
Physiologically, you're ready for it.
Yeah,
But then more importantly, mentally and emotionally, it's like, oh, I've been here before.
yeah.
I'm gonna be okay, no problem. Versus, what the fuck is going
I'm not
on?
ready for this. I think I've seen
Exactly.
the TikTok videos where they have people in that slingshot and they just like totally
Yes.
panic. Yeah, that's
Yes. Yeah.
that's that's what I'm picturing as you're speaking of the experience.
Yeah. Well
All
said.
right. Well, the preparation. Okay. Like Chris said, you got to prepare your body, but the actual ayahuasca preparation. Not that any of you are planning to go out there and make a recipe out of this, but it can take several days, and each day can take several hours. Okay, they got to go out there, they got to cut the vines, they got to pick through it, figure out which leaves do what. They got to make sure that everything's okay. They put it in a giant pot. They boil it until the water is reduced apparently by half. So that's a whole lot of boiling, right? They combine all the stuff in there, and this combination of the leaves, the vines, plus whatever other additives, the seasoning, the salt, the garlic, whatever it is they're adding to it to make it their own, um, it takes a lot of time to prepare.
Yeah.
Now, the actual picking up of all these grocery list of items, that is also a very spiritual process that requires a ritual. For example, some tribes believe that the vine must be cleaned meticulously with wooden spoons and pounded with wooden mallets until it's fiber. And then others believe that you must pick the lower chacruna leaf at sunrise, and when you do, you must say a prayer. So there
Hmm.
is definitely a lot of ceremony, a lot of ritual that goes in with this type of ayahuasca experience. And when you think about that, it's like, do I want to do mushrooms that I can easily pick or grow or something like that? Or do I want to do ayahuasca that is going to require a huge ceremony? Again, different medicines will do different things. But as you're paying out of pocket to go to Rhythmia, if you're paying out of pocket to go to a retreat, um, if you're choosing to do a retreat in the Amazon versus finding some underground thing in Kentucky, what are the rituals that went with that? You know, what possibly could be the differences? You may get a different brew each time. I don't know, but that's for the individual to decide on what they want to do. Not to say that one is better than the other. I'm just saying that some of them take ritual very much into account, and others have not.
Yeah. To kind of add some perspective to this, again, when you're brewing the medicine, it often happens sometimes in one day, but often over multiple days, multiple hours of that day. And I participated in the brewing of a portion um, of the medicine. And what I appreciated about it was, and it was a 6 hour long process for just a portion of it. And what I appreciate about that was the energy that went into it was, we're going to be here, we're going to be present with this medicine, and we're also going to put our energy into it. So then it was like, okay, what memories are you bringing up? What prayers are you saying? What energy are you putting forth? Right? With the thought is that this medicine is going to help people and it's going to go into people's bodies. What is the energy that you're putting forth into it? So it was all around having reverence for it, putting good prayers and stuff forward. And I appreciated that level of care that went into this. And when I've witnessed really good shamans with this medicine, um, they have had that same level of reverence and care, not just for the brewing of it, but then for the ceremony of taking the medicine, and then again for the care of the people who are then having the experience with the medicine. And the shamans on this who do this incredibly well create one of the safest, most beautiful containers that I've ever seen. There's an utter respect for the power of this medicine that I've truly appreciated.
Definitely. So it kind of makes me wonder about the pharmacological version of this. It's like, well,
Hmm.
are we going to lose the ceremony because of that? I don't know. Traditional uses. Let's see. The uses of ayahuasca in traditional societies in South America have varied greatly. Some cultures do use it for shamanic purposes, but in other cases, it can be consumed socially amongst friends in order to, which to me seems odd, but in order to learn more about the natural environment and even in order to visit friends and family who are far away.
Hmm.
Again, more of a spiritual visit, not a physical visit.
And
Uh,
um, that thing with nature, like it does enhance your senses as well. And so there are traditions around this about utilizing the medicine and then going out with nature and communing with nature, like literally talking to the trees or to the spirit of the jaguars and panthers and everything else that happens. That's where I was trying to get at the nature of this medicine. For me, in my experience, definitely feels one that's very tied to nature. It puts you in tune with nature, which is why it's actually hard for me to fully imagine the pharmacological experience of this, because I've always felt and seen it so tied with being within nature and then the connection that you feel with nature itself.
to me, I see the ritual of it as well. It's like
Mm.
the ritual puts you in the right headspace. So taking away the ritual and just giving you the pill, if you would, um, it almost diminishes what ayahuasca is supposed to be. I've never taken the pill form. I've never tried it. I don't know what it does. If it's a similar experience or it's slightly different, I don't know. But I do feel that the ritual is part of the experience. The ritual is it's very much getting your mindset to that place.
Mm.
So people that work with ayahuasca in non-traditional contexts often align themselves with the philosophies and cosmologies associated with shamanism as practiced among indigenous people in Urarina of the Peruvian Amazon. Dietary taboos are often associated with the use of ayahuasca. Again, you gotta watch your diet before, during, and after. Although these seem to be specific to the culture around in Iquitos, Peru, which is another major center for ayahuasca tourism. So, again, with the ritual, the role of the shamans. Shamans, curanderos, experienced users of ayahuasca advise against consuming ayahuasca when not in the presence of one or several well trained shamans. Don't do it by yourself. It's probably not going to be a good experience. Again, you might
And
need
it's a
somebody to hold you.
very powerful psychedelic. Yeah, let me be super clear. I do not recommend doing it on your own. Be under a very good shaman or guide.
Or in a padded room. Da-da-da. In some areas, there are purported brujos, which are witches, who masquerade as real shamans to entice tourists to drink some of the ayahuasca in their presence. And then what they'll do is they'll steal your energy or your wallet. and they believe that every person has a limited stockpile of both energy and wallets. Shamans lead the ceremonial consumption of the ayahuasca beverage in a rite that typically takes place over the entire night. During the ceremony, the effect of the drink lasts only 4 hours. So what you do is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of sip ayahuasca throughout the night. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, so the way it goes is they say typically you'll have X number of cups that evening, right? And you could have two, three, four, they could go up to like 5 cups, for an evening. But basically, you go up and via ceremony, your cup is filled, and then you drink that down, right? That is, so it's like a little more than a shot glass, kind of a shot glass amount. You go back, you lay down, you have your experience, you ride that particular wave of the medicine. And you don't, it's like if you started, and for people who are listening to this, it's like if you start at a level 1, like you rise up, and then as you start to come back down from that experience, you might then be at a 3. So each time you're taking a successive cup, you're also hitting greater amounts of the medicine, greater amounts of surrender required. Often, if your ego is having a challenge with letting go and surrendering, more medicine will definitely get you there. You get to a point very quickly with ayahuasca where you're not dancing the medicine is dancing you. And so, it can be really powerful. And then that goes on throughout the night. Often the space between the cups will be between 2 to 3, sometimes 4 hours, but often every 2 to 3 hours you go through. The longest ceremony that I've experienced went from I believe it was about 7 p.m. to about 10 a.m. the next morning.
Wow, that's a lot of ayahuasca. Let's see. Prior to the ceremony, participants are instructed to abstain from spicy foods, red meat, and sex. The ceremony is usually accompanied with purging, which includes vomiting and diarrhea, which is believed to be a release of built-up emotions and negative energy.
So to speak to this, so there's definitely a purgative quality. Like,
Mhm.
be prepared. You're going to be given a bucket with ayahuasca, and you're going to have a bathroom nearby, and they're going to be used. But again, everybody's experience is different. Of the 4 nights that I did this, I really only purged the final night. But I'd also, I've worked in this realm for a long time. I'd cleansed my body, my mind, my emotions quite a bit before going in, which I think really added into why my experience was different than many other people there. But similarly, even before I ever utilized ayahuasca, for whatever reason, when I'm on medicine and there is some powerful emotion or energy or something that needs to be released, like it's a hurt that no longer serves me and it's to be let go.
Mhm.
Don't know why, but I often will purge. I will vomit up. Sometimes nothing comes up. It just feels like, I'll call it like an energy purge.
Mhm.
But it's like, for whatever reason, my body has associated that act with getting rid of something, and I feel the leaving of it from my system. I feel the leaving of it, and then I believe, like, my nervous system, my body believes it as well, because it links that purging to that release, right? And so I wasn't put off by the fact that there is purging with ayahuasca, because for some reason my body just naturally did this anyways on other medicines well before then. But it is very prominent with ayahuasca. So you're going to get comfortable with puke and crap, to be perfectly honest with you. You're going to get comfortable with it. It's no big deal. Know that going in. Don't worry about it. Don't be shy about it. Just, like, you will be cared for, especially, again, why you want to be under good guidance with this. But you will be cared for. And it's a whole natural part about it. There's not worth resisting it or holding back or any other things. Allow this to be a part of the process for you.
Wow. Huh. Sounds very unpleasant. I'm reminded of a time when both the wife and I had a little food poisoning. We're just
Yes.
purging.
Yes.
Non-traditional usage. In the late 20th century, the practice of ayahuasca drinking began spreading in Europe. and North America and elsewhere. So, first ayahuasca churches affiliated with the Brazilian Santo Daime were established in the Netherlands. A legal case was filed. This is what I was talking about earlier against two of the church leaders, Hans Bogers, one of the original, and Bogers, one of the original founders of the Dutch Santo Daime community, and Geraldine Finch Nimon, the head of the Amsterdam Santo Daime community. Both of them were charged with distributing a controlled substance, being DMT. However, prosecution was unable to prove that the use of the ayahuasca by members of the Santo Daime constituted a sufficient threat to public health and order such that it warranted denying their rights to religious freedom under their Article 9 in 2001. A verdict of the Amsterdam District Court is an important precedent. Since then, groups that are not affiliated with the Santo Daime have used ayahuasca, and a number of different styles have been developed, including non-religious approaches. Now, this became important because once they established it as a legal religious ceremony in the Netherlands, it allowed them to use this to spread the use of ayahuasca within their church throughout Europe. Now that allowed it to spread to the Americas. And now if you belong to one of the churches that uses ayahuasca, it is now legal for you to grow it, to import it, to use it, to offer it to your members of your congregation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, where the DMT is still considered illegal by federal law. If you're doing it within this structure of the church, it is a sacrament. So the effects, and I think Chris has spoken to a few of these. People who have consumed ayahuasca report having a mystical experience and spiritual revelations regarding their purpose on Earth, the true nature of the universe, the deep insight into how to be the best person that you can possibly be. This is viewed by many as a spiritual awakening, and and what is often described as a near-death experience or a rebirth. It is often reported that individuals feel they gain access to higher spiritual dimensions and make contact with various spiritual or extra-dimensional beings who can act as guides or healers. The ingestion of ayahuasca can also cause significant but temporary emotional and psychological distress. Excessive use could possibly lead to what they call serotonin syndrome, although this has never been specifically called by ayahuasca, except in conjunction with certain antidepressants like SSRIs.
So
Depending
right
on the
there,
dosage.
not just to break in right there again, this is one of the reasons that if you're on SSRIs, it is really, really important that you wean off of them before taking ayahuasca. You can end up with some pretty substantial medical issues if you don't. And so just remember, SSRIs and ayahuasca do not mix. Do not mix the two. And often SSRIs, like if you're going through depression, you're going through other things, like a lot of people are on SSRIs. And one of the reasons they want to use ayahuasca is to help to address, that core issue. So again, that's why you have a good guide. You have good medical guidance on this. Like you would want to wind down the SSRIs before you get to a point where you'd utilize ayahuasca. That was something that I appreciated about Rhythmia, was they had medical personnel on staff to be able to help guide you prior to you ever arriving, but also to make sure that you were well cared for during the experience itself.
I don't know if anybody can ever, purge themselves to death, but having purged myself with food poisoning, it felt like death was near. Depending on the dosage, temporary non-entheogenic effects of ayahuasca can include tremors, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, autonomic instability, hyperthermia, sweating, motor function impairment, sedation, relaxation, vertigo, the dizziness, and muscle spasms, which are primarily caused by the Harmala alkaloids in the ayahuasca. Long-term negative effects are not known. Again,
not known, but I mean, one thing that we do have here is we have a history of this being used for thousands of years, right? At least a
Right.
thousand years. And so, um, is there a history on this, and have indigenous cultures or other cultures been using this for a long time, um, to great success, and also, not realizing like long-term harmful effects of it? Yes. However, when you begin to mix medicines like this with our, modern pharmacological take a pill for everything, like, culture, they can clash. You want to be super, super careful.
Yeah. Yeah. Not only that, but it just sounds like I don't think I could party with this on a weekly basis.
No, again, you're not going to party on this one. Like
Definitely not.
this is one of those medicines that people are going to because of the medicinal benefits of it, because it's helping them with something more painful in their life. This is, it can be a very beautiful experience, but can also be a very challenging, uncomfortable experience to go through. The only reason you'd want to do that is because it's helping you through something that is way more uncomfortable or painful in your life, i.e., the depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Right. JG asks, some of the medications you've discussed before do not have a lethal dosage. Can we presume that ayahuasca does?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't have the answer, so I'm not going to say yes or no. But I'm not aware that it does.
From the research that I did, yes, but when combined with SSRIs or other medications.
Yeah, on its own.
And also people with heart palpitations.
Mm.
It was recommended that people with any kind of heart issues, like heart palpitations, do not partake in ayahuasca in any way, shape, or form because it's just too strenuous on you, and the it can be lethal in that scenario. Therapeutic effects. There are potential antidepressants and oxyolytic effects of ayahuasca. For example, in 2018, it was reported that a single dose of ayahuasca significantly reduced symptoms of treatment resistant depression, kind of like the ketamine treatment, right?
Mm-hmm.
In small placebo controlled trials, most specifically, statistically significant reduction of up to 82% in depressive scores were observed with baselines 1, 7, and 21. And they were measured by all these other different measurements: Hamilton Rating Scale for Depression, the Montgomery Asberg Depression Rating, and the Anxious Depression Subscale of the Brief Psychiatry Rating Scale. Other placebo controlled research has provided evidence that ayahuasca can indeed help improve self perception in those with social anxiety disorder. So, social anxiety, depression. Okay. It has also been studied for the treatment of addictions and shown to be very effective with lower addiction severity index scores seen in users of ayahuasca compared to their controls. Ayahuasca users have also seem to consume less alcohol. PTSD. So good for anxiety, good for depression. Preliminary research for PTSD suggests that it can reduce dependence on addictive drugs. Part of the explanation may be that it helps ease the pain of traumatic memories that people sometimes self medicate with, such as with alcohol, tobacco, and cocaine. To date, any evidence that ayahuasca can do the same for people with PTSD has been purely anecdotal. Again, when I first started looking at getting out of my own PTSD, I remember watching this documentary. If you've seen the first show, I talk about that, where I saw a guy puke his brains out and then just walk out of there the next day and just feel normal, right? Um, so this got me started on my journey onto trying to figure out what is out there. I was ready to go take a trip to South America myself if I had to.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely it does something for PTSD, but we don't have the research to back it up yet. If that makes sense, there's just
Yeah.
no long-term research. It's all anecdotal.
My understanding, and I think I can't wait for the research to catch up,
Right.
but again, like my understanding, truly, if we're looking at ayahuasca as a PTSD treatment, um, my guidance would be, if you can, if it's legal around you, you can gain access to it, look at
Mhm.
MDMA therapy first. Number one is it's not a powerful psychedelic in the same way. which can make it for a way more pleasant experience. But also, it seems to be targeted and more effective towards PTSD as far as the anecdotes that I've heard are. I can't wait again for research to catch up, but
Right.
if it just providing some level of guidance, I would look towards MDMA therapy first for PTSD specifically, but
Right.
ayahuasca has a ton of benefits and is very useful for many things and possibly even on the continuing journey of your own healing.
So, if you are interested in being part of the research and wanting to volunteer, and you find yourself in the UK, currently Spain and the UK are looking into the Beckley Foundation, where they are looking for 580 retreat participants per year. They are specifically looking for combat veterans suffering from PTSD. They're actively recruiting for this being one of their largest studies of its kind. Again, they're still recruiting. They're trying to get that information going. I would agree with Chris. MDMA was a little bit more of a loving medicine. Having participated in that, having actually gone through the MDMA therapy, I didn't, to put it a little, crudely, I didn't shit myself. I didn't puke myself. I felt warmth, love. Um, yeah, it was just a very pleasant experience where ayahuasca, it seems like it would just beat the PTSD out of you and not in a nice way. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I don't know that it has to beat it out of you, but uh, some people have the experience of being squeezed like a tube of toothpaste, um, right? And that may be less pleasant for you than other routes to get there.
right.
Again, I truly believe and appreciate and am grateful for ayahuasca therapies. Um, my last experience with it was a little over a year ago. I was in Costa Rica, and I I believe that there it will come back around, but it
Yeah.
is one of those medicines that I believe is important to be called to rather than to force yourself into.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the calling is because you just need something now. And
Yeah,
if that's the case, if that's the calling, I say go for it.
yeah,
But keep in mind there's kindler, gentler ways of accomplishing the same thing. Legal status. Of course, ayahuasca contains DMT. DMT is a Schedule 1 substance, making it illegal under federal law in the US. People have been federally prosecuted for ayahuasca possessions as recently as 2018. Some of the underground retreats in the US, if they catch you there, they are going to charge you. It's a federal crime. As recently as 2018. State laws also typically outlaw DMT. However, federal courts have granted specific religious groups the right to use ayahuasca for spiritual purposes. And the following is just a bunch of other court stuff that happened along the way. If you're interested in reading this, I invite you to go ahead and pause it. If you're interested in the Religious Freedom Act restoration or something like that. Um, it's all there. In 2019, the city of Oakland and Santa Cruz, California, and these are cities at the bottom that just made it legal for people to have ayahuasca in their possession. Again, city by city, not state by state. So there's small progress is being done where it's legal in Oakland, California, Santa Cruz, California, Ann Arbor, Michigan, where it's been decriminalized, Washington, D.C. Again, feel free to do your own research. I have a little Wikipedia link at the bottom that says Wikipedia legal status of ayahuasca by country, and it'll tell you which cities, which countries, which states ayahuasca is legal to partake in. Any comments or questions at this point that anybody might have? Please feel free to interject them at this time while Chris and I will play the theme of Jeopardy in the background.
yeah. While we're doing this, just to jump in, so we've talked about this before in all of the episodes that have to do with psychedelic medicines. Set and setting are incredibly important. Your mindset and the setting. One thing I did appreciate about Rhythmia when I went there is because many people going to Rhythmia or places like Rhythmia, it's their first experience with any of this. And so, what I did appreciate is they created a container for everybody going in, and they repeated this over and over and over again. Really helped you kind of like get it. But the process that they recommended going through and utilizing their particular ceremonies and rituals around ayahuasca were that each night you go in with a particular intention, right? And the first night, the intention that they suggested, you didn't have to use it, but you could, was, to allow the medicine to heal your heart. And, by that, it's like how to bring you in touch with your own emotions, with your with your heart, with your feelings, with any anger or hurt or other things that you might feel there that are really keeping you from loving yourself or loving others, right? That was one. The next night, once you feel like you've experienced that, it was to show me who I've become, right? So, what is the view of who you are outside of your own mind and perceptions and lenses on the world? Um, to ask the medicine to show you how do you show up? Like, are you actually more kind and caring than you give yourself credit for? Are you more angry and violent than you give yourself credit for? Like, how do you actually show up in this world for other people, and to have a view of that, right? Because that awareness is really important. It allows us to become who we choose to be rather than just who we are by default or the unconscious patterns that are running. Um, and then the third night or fourth night or whenever it is that you might get here, the intention they suggest is merge me back with my soul at all costs, right? And while there's a spiritual context around that, um, you can take it as either spirit, like truly, like merge you back into your soul and be as much of your soul as possible. But you can also take it as a non-spiritual view of help me just be the man or the woman who I am, and help me be that person more and more and more of the time. And I think
And
it's
this is a
important
bit
that
in response to JG's comment. There is clearly a very strong link with religion and spirituality with the ayahuasca use. For
mm,
those who do not have such beliefs, is there any use to it?
absolutely. Like I met people at Rhythmia experiencing this again for their first time who didn't buy into the ritual or the spirituality of it. And that's fine. They still experience plenty of benefits. All of these things work on multiple levels, whether you buy into the spirituality portion of it or you don't. My experience has been that as I utilize these medicines, it's opened me up to spirituality, not to be dogmatic or to say, I believe in this one spiritual path, or I believe that, this one spiritual dogma is right and true and all the others are wrong. But it's just opened me up to go, there's more to this world than I can sense on a day-to-day basis. There's more than I realize, and now I just become open and curious as to what it means. So it opened me up to curiosity as opposed to implanting me with some, spiritual dogma, if you will. And I know people have taken this purely from a psychological, like atheistic point of view, going, this is a powerful medicine that's really helped me get in touch with my emotions, helped me get in touch with things that I had been repressing and pushing behind, helped me expunge and release things that I feel like have been hurting me for a long time, helped me move past addictions. And so, absolutely, it has use and is powerful wherever you happen to be in that spectrum. And all of
So,
it is right. Wherever
with
you
that,
are
I
in that
have a
spectrum
question
is
for you.
absolutely right for you.
I do have a question for you on that end. Being that you have partaken in a couple of medicines along the way,
Mm.
what made you decide to fly to Costa Rica to go to Rhythmia and say, I want to do this. I feel I need to do this. What pushed you in that direction? Um, that were the other medicines not doing it for you anymore? Did you need something stronger? Was there something that was just not uncovered yet? What did it for you?
Mm. Um, my use case might be a little different than other people's, right?
Yeah.
So for context, I'd had over a decade of experience with medicines and psychedelics before I got to the point of choosing to experience ayahuasca. And ayahuasca had been on my radar for a long time. And my mind was like, hey, yeah, I'm curious about that. What would that be? I'm a curious being, right? And so I want to understand these things. And so curiosity was a driver, but it was never enough of a driver. Like if I'm just being honest with everybody here, my mind was like, hey, I would like to experience that. And somewhere in my gut, I didn't feel comfortable with it. I didn't feel
Yeah.
ready for it. And so I respected what was happening in my gut. I didn't know why. It wasn't a logical reason. It wasn't something that I could write down and, 1 + 1 = 2, empirically calculate out. But my mind was like, yeah. My body was like, no. And I'm like, all right. So the answer is no right now. Um, and what shifted and changed was at the end of 2020, moving into 2021. Um, I started to feel called to it. Again, this is hard to put into empirical terms, but I was supposed to go in May of uh, 2020. And I'd signed up for Rhythmia, I had paid and everything else, and then everything that happened with COVID and travel, all of that happened, it got canceled, and I just ended up with a credit. And I didn't had no idea when I was going to use that credit. Hell, I didn't even have to use that credit. Um, but I felt called to it. And then just some interesting things started to happen. Like, oh, okay, well, my birthday's coming up. I could go to Costa Rica and use that. Uh, oh, my gut isn't objecting. That's weird. Okay, cool. Well, maybe I could. And then this other event started to happen in Costa Rica right before the time when I was going to go down to experience it at Rhythmia. And then my friends were gonna come down and look at buying a house and invited me like to stay with them just after the time that I was gonna go down to Rhythmia. And these little synchronicities began to add up. And whether you believe in synchronicities or not, right? I take them as like little little nudges or hints from the universe personally. However, well, the more important thing was is each of these would happen. I'm going, huh, I wonder if now's the time for ayahuasca. I checked in. My mind still remained curious. My heart was just like, yeah, bro, do what you want to do. But my gut started to feel good about it, right? Like I think of this as like I've heard, I think it might have been Tim Ferriss um, talk about this well. Like if you can get the mind, the heart, and the body in like an aligned yes, where it's like yes, 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 like that's something worth doing, and that's what began to align for me. It was like, yeah, like something about this and this timing felt right. And so I didn't go to like I've very often done medicine in order to resolve something in my life, in order to like really tackle a problem, being very action oriented or even outcome oriented at times. But I didn't do that with ayahuasca. I went down there because it felt right, because I was curious, and I had very little in the way of expectations. I think that, in addition to my previous experience with medicines, in addition to just being on a good diet for a little while before I went down there, and in addition to doing a lot of meditation in 2020 with all the stuff that was going on in the world, and really having faced a lot of my emotions, that's what led to me having a very different experience. Like of those 4 nights that I experienced the medicine, night one was a little uncomfortable because it felt like I didn't yet trust this experience. I didn't yet trust the people and the shamans running this. I felt a little paranoia. I was like, who the fuck are these people? Do I trust them? Like that stuff coming up. And then it just felt uncomfortable in my body. It was like the medicine was resonating at a particular frequency and I was resonating at a different one and we just hadn't like matched up yet, right? It was like dissonance, a little bit of dissonance. Um, the second night I took it was peaceful and beautiful and nourishing, and it felt like some part of me was nourished in a way that I can't explain. Um, like I spent time with my spirit and my soul family, and it's like it felt like the way I've described it is it felt like stepping into a warm cottage after having been outside in the cold for years, lifetimes, right? So it was a beautiful, peaceful experience. The third night, there was a new relationship that I had entered, and I knew that I hadn't been in a relationship for a long time. So I actually went in with the intention of allowing the medicine to help me prepare to open my heart and to be in that relationship as fully as I could be.
Mhm.
And I found it very helpful for that. And then the fourth night was the only real purgative night that I had, but it was also a very different brew that is specifically more purgative than the other brews were. And so I purged a good bit that night. All of it was comfortable, but I also had just incredible moments of peace
Mhm.
and kind of a euphoric peace, that peace that you feel where the world is good and there's nothing to worry about and you get to be present with everything. And what I was present to were some people having incredible, even ecstatic experiences, blissful experiences, and some people having horrifically challenging experiences. Um, and I felt at peace with all of it, with everything that was happening around me. I felt at peace with myself. I felt at peace with the universe. It was truly a beautiful night. Um, but in sharing like my story with other people who were there, especially because this was very, very new to them and can be disorienting and can be scary and can, bring up fears because you don't know what to expect. And it's showing you a whole new realm of things that you've never experienced before. Um, Many people having their first experience with ayahuasca were having a way more challenging experience with it. At the end of it, um, everybody I talked to was so grateful for what they had been through. The benefits were like that documentary that you described, where somebody was, having a very challenging evening, and then were lighter and freer and like grateful for what they had gone through the next day. The same thing can happen when we, do deep therapy and we process our emotions. When we get in touch with that fear or that hurt or that sadness or that grief or whatever it is inside that we anger even that we haven't faced in a long time, and you face it, like that's not easy. It doesn't matter if you're doing that with a therapist or you're doing that with medicine or you're doing that in some other like modality. It doesn't matter. It's a challenging experience. That's the thing that we've been avoiding for so long. And yet, when you get on the other side of that is a new level of peace, a new level of freedom, a new level of equanimity. And so it may not always be easy, but in my experience, it's worthwhile. That's the way I would describe it.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah,
And just to close the show, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, if you want to find a facility near you, you can go to https // The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Behavioral Health Treatment Locator, https findtreatment.samhsa.gov. And lastly, the SAMHSA National Helpline is 1-800-662-4357. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be here again next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. I hope you find the time to be with us.
beautiful. Big love.
Big love.